Bodybuilding, an exotic, controversial, and within decades became what is now a revolutionized sport. As exotic as the sport is, bodybuilding did not start off this way. From the strong men of the early years to the changes in the sport by an Austrian self-made star, bodybuilding is now being done by many people all over the world. In the 1890s, a man by the name of Eugene Sandow became what is known as the father of modern bodybuilding. During his years, there were not as many people fascinated by how much weight he could lift, but by the shape and sculpture of his body. Sandow then started performing in which showcased his physique. This showcase transitioned into what now is known as bodybuilding competitions. As a veteran and competing and currently four-time Mr. Olympia, Jay Cutler mentions the sport as an art form.
I think it's more of an art form rather than necessarily a sport. You know, I call it a sport, but with us, I mean, there's no one getting knocked out or anything like that. So guys are getting up, and it's very judgmental. You have 7 to 9 judges on a judging panel, and you're trying to choose the best body up there. The problem is people sitting behind, whether you sit 5 rows, 10 rows, 15 rows back, the physiques change.
Athletes go up on stage with oil and tan on themselves to show the muscles and the bodies they have achieved. And as they perform their poses, judges on a judging panel score each individual by points on their physique. Bodies are judged by an athlete's muscle composition, symmetry, and proportion. With the outgrown numbers, bodybuilding has become a mainstream sport, taken on by people of different sizes and shape. In the world of bodybuilding, there are 2 major competitions that athletes strive for. One, the Arnold Classic by Schwarzenegger himself, and second, by Joe Weider, the Mr. Olympia. The biggest transition from the first Mr. Olympia, Larry Scott, stood out at 6 feet 2 inches and weighed at 235 pounds. His name was Arnold Schwarzenegger, a young Austrian coming into the United States to compete against other top bodybuilders to win one thing, the title of being called Mr. Olympia. And although there have been greats before Schwarzenegger's time, none had the same impact that he brought within a decade's time. Due to the unfortunate financial return of the sport during the 70s, Arnold turned to other things for money. He would soon find himself acting in films, his first big hit, Conan the Barbarian. As the films became more known, so did Schwarzenegger's physique. People watched in awe as they saw his body on the big screen. This caused people's desire to achieve a physique of their own, or one like of Arnold.
Arnold, in my opinion, was the man that brought bodybuilding. The idea of pumping iron, the idea of working with all kinds of muscle and making it an extreme example of what you can do with a human form, more so than any other individual.
As Arnold became more and more involved in the scene, the sport of bodybuilding followed as well. The increased number of competitors helped boom the sport into the mainstream, making it a sport done by an immense number of people, more compared to any other decade.
When we first started, more like a shadow sport. It was like a freak show. And it's not a freak show anymore, the fact that everybody in the mainstream got involved.
You know, it's becoming more popular. You know, we've seen, record number of shows increasing, the prize money's going up. It's becoming more recognized. I mean, I promote 6 different events.
In comparison to previous decades, bodybuilders of today experience the change that has occurred within the sport.
Bodybuilding was nothing when it started. It was kind of like a cult thing. People were amazed, I think, by the physiques. But if you really take, like the first Mr. Olympia prize was like $500. In 2012 and into this year, it's $250,000 for first place. So obviously, the prize money has gone up.
With the changes throughout the years, athletes themselves have also changed. This caused many controversial events between competitors and the products in which they consume. The number one product? Steroids.
The thing about steroids is, they've always been somewhat illegal.
Steroids have been in use by athletes to prevent injury and enhance performance. In 2004, President George W. Bush passed a bill in which banned steroid use in sports. Bodybuilding became the number one sport in suspicion due to the increased size of the athletes.
It doesn't matter if you were taking a ton of drugs, if you don't train right and eat right, it's still not going to look anything. If you don't have that natural, the genetics, you can't improve on something just because you're taking a bunch of drugs.
We get a lot of pinpoints about drug use because of how the bodies have grown.
In comparison to the athletes of today, Arnold was 6'2" and 235 pounds. In recent years, competitors are competing of heights of 5'11", weighing in at 280 pounds. The change in size is incredibly noticeable. During Schwarzenegger's prime, he had won 6 Mr. Olympias from 1970 to 1975, a record during the time. Coming back in 1980, he would be crowned as Mr. Olympia once again for his 7th title. In recent years, Arnold Schwarzenegger had admitted to steroid use, but had set a movement for not only men of bodybuilding, but women as well. During the decade of the 70s bodybuilders, there was a national upbringing for equal rights, the women's rights movement. Women such as Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton helped push this movement to give the women the rights they needed to do just as the men did, anytime, anywhere, including the sport of bodybuilding. In the year of Schwarzenegger winning his 7th Mr. Olympia title, it was also the debut of the Miss Olympia. A woman by the name of Rachel McLeish would not only earn the title of Miss Olympia, but be a part of a revolutionizing sport for the years to come.
Anytime you see an event in history, it's going to change patterns for the future. It doesn't matter, it's, whether it's, Arnold leading the way or, if you're talking other sports.
I definitely gave women a sense of confidence that they probably didn't have. You can give women political rights, you can give them rights on paper, but when they can bring it to the gym and you're seeing them engaging in things like Olympic powerlifting, then by all means I think it makes it more of an inclusive sport.
Bodybuilding has become an ever-changed sport, starting off as a performance that only few knew about to the biggest transition and legacy left by a single person. Arnold Schwarzenegger truly set the stage to make the sport of bodybuilding of what it is today.